Well, joining us now are Balpreet Singh, legal counsel and spokesperson for the World Sikh Organization of Canada, and Stephen Brown, CEO of the National Council of Canadian Muslims. Hello to both of you.
Hello. How are you?
Hello. Hi. Mr. Singh, I'm going to ask you to start us off here because yesterday the Prime Minister spoke of credible evidence. Today, your organization did not couch your language. Your organization clearly believes New Delhi is responsible for the killing of Mr. Singh Nijjar in the Vancouver area. Why that lack of hesitation? Do you have evidence?
So this is actually based on decades of Indian interference in Canada in the Sikh community. So for most Canadians, this was a shock to hear that India might be engaging in these sort of activities. But for Sikhs in Canada, this is not a surprise. So when Mr. Nijjar was assassinated, we knew exactly who's behind it. There were indications well before that. As early as June 2022, there were threats against his life. In fact, in the Indian media, a narrative was being formed that he might be targeted, and they claimed tongue-in-cheek, well, it might be a gang war. He might, lose his life. And then his death was actually preceded by two other targeted assassinations of Sikhs who supported Khalistan. And there were actually social media accounts and others in India who said, bad news for the Khalistanis, dropping like flies. Bad news will likely be coming next from Canada. And all of us knew what that meant. Hardeep Singh Nijjar was wanted in India. There was a $1 million rupee bounty on his head. And there was no doubt in his mind and the community's mind that he was an active target.
So what do you say then to politicians like Pierre Poilievre, who right now are asking to see more evidence?
I think that there are active investigations that are ongoing, not one, but I understand multiple investigations. And I think with time, that evidence will be coming forward. But as we all know, when we're dealing with intelligence issues, not everything can be brought before the public. But to have the Prime Minister of Canada make that sort of a statement in the House of Commons, we have to rest assured that there must be very strong evidence to indicate that India was indeed involved.
Okay. Stephen, I'm going to bring you in now because, you were part of the news conference earlier today with the World Sikh Organization here in Ottawa. And while the focus right now is very much on the Sikh community, in that news conference, you talked about Muslims here in Canada being targets as well. How many incidents are we talking about? Just how common is this?
It's difficult to say exactly how many incidents, but one thing that we can say is, especially for members of the Indian Muslim community, it's quite common for them to contact the National Council of Canadian Muslims, say that either they have received threatening messages, that their family members in India have received threatening messages. We know several people personally that are very close to the National Council of Canadian Muslims that have been targeted by RSS-affiliated organizations in Canada, in the GTA. So when this happened, there was many people in the Muslim community who were quite concerned. What does this mean for my security? That a prominent member, leader of the Sikh community, would be assassinated in broad daylight by a foreign government. It's absolutely despicable. And nobody in this country should worry about their safety when they're walking out of a place of worship. Okay,
listen, I want to read to both of you right now. This is a statement from India's Ministry for External Affairs. And in responding to what's happened here, this is what they say in part. Quote, allegations of government of India's involvement in any act of violence in Canada are absurd and motivated. Similar allegations were made by the Canadian Prime Minister to our Prime Minister and were completely rejected. Such unsubstantiated allegations seek to shift the focus from Khalistani terrorists and extremists who have been provided shelter in Canada and continue to threaten India's sovereignty and territorial integrity. The inaction of the Canadian government on this matter has been a long-standing and continuing concern. Again, that's a statement from the Indian government, its External Affairs Department. How do you respond to that? And to be clear, Mr. Singh, I'm going to start here. To be clear, before his death, the Indian government did accuse Mr. Nijjar of being a terrorist.
Yeah. So how India defines terrorism is very different to what we see as terrorism and how we understand that term. India defines terrorism as anything that threatens its territorial integrity and unity. So someone talking about sovereignty, talking about Khalistan, is heralded as a terrorist. There were accusations made against Mr. Nijjar in 2016 that he was running a terrorist training camp in Hope, BC. There was a video posted in Indian media of Sikhs at a firing range. The mayor of Hope actually had to come forward and say that the allegations were completely ludicrous. Now, if there was anything criminal that Mr. Nijjar was involved with, that information should have been passed on to the Canadian authorities, and he would have been tried, and if guilty, he would have been convicted. But what he was guilty of was being the president of the largest Gurdwara in Canada and speaking from that stage about Khalistan. And he was very open about his support for Khalistan, and he was encouraging people to vote in a Khalistan referendum. So the last time a referendum took place here in Canada, it was in Brampton. Over 100,000 Sikhs showed up to vote in support of Khalistan. India was very childish at that time. It demanded that that referendum not be allowed to happen. I mean, ignoring the fact that casting a vote is the definition of democracy. And then in response to Canada not stopping it, they actually issued a travel advisory against Canada, saying that Indian nationals are no longer safe. So fast forward to now, this summer, he was planning a referendum vote in Surrey. That happened after he passed away just a couple weeks ago, in which 135,000 Sikhs once again turned up to support Khalistan. But India is not going to let that go. They persecute anyone that talks about Khalistan, and they call him a terrorist. So once again, this was not a surprise to us. They had actively said what they wanted to do, and they had a bounty on his head, and finally they were successful.
Listen, I'm quickly running out of time, and Stephen, I did want to get your reaction to the statement, but let me get to my next and last question here, and I'm going to give each one of you about 45 seconds, if you will. How should the Canadian government be responding to this? Beyond the statement being made in the House of Commons, what do you want the Canadian government to do to not only react to the harassment that the Sikh community is noting, but you're noting as well with, in particular, Muslims from India here in Canada?
Yes. Well, once again, I think it's important to remember that a Canadian citizen, what we're talking about here is a Canadian citizen that was assassinated in the streets of our own country. And so this is an extremely serious matter, and it needs to be dealt with the utmost urgency. We're asking for 4 things tangibly at the National Council of Canadian Muslims. Number 1, the immediate recalling of Canada's ambassador. Number 2, we should start the process to expel India's ambassador to Canada. Number 3, we should cease all discussions of trade negotiations with India. And 4, in conjunction with the WSO, we're calling on the immediate banning of the RSS organization in Canada and the expulsion of all of its agents from the country. You can't do business with a country that is killing your citizens. We need to make sure that the Canadian government and all opposition parties are working together in a joint fashion to ensure the security and liberties of Canadian citizens. Yeah,
Mr. Singh, last word to you. Again, quickly running out of time here.
Yeah, we stand with the NCCM in those requests. We believe that Canada needs to do more to protect Canadian Sikhs who are currently under threat. There are a number of Sikhs that have been told that their lives are in danger. They've been told to leave their homes, not to be around their own children. And we believe that the diplomatic corps, so one diplomat was ejected yesterday, but the entire Indian diplomatic corps needs to be reviewed. We understand there are more individuals who are potentially involved in espionage and in interference here in Canada, and they don't have a place here. They need to be sent back to India.
Balpreet Singh, Stephen Brown, thank you very much to both of you for the time.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.